everybody! Today I want to talk about the 2012-2013 vampire movie called Byzantium, which is directed by Neil Jordan, the director of The Crying Game and Interview with the Vampire. This movie was a movie I've been looking forward to for a while. It had been sold as being a very female-driven vampire narrative, which is really big because there are a lot of female vampires who are the leads in their own production. And the synopsis goes as such. Two female vampires wreak havoc on an unsuspecting English seaside community in this deliciously depraved supernatural drama from Oscar winner Neil Jordan, The Crying Game and Interview with the Vampire, Introverted Eleanor, played by Saoirse Ronan, and the outgoing Clara, played by Gemma Arterton, both carry secrets from deep in their shared past, all 200 years of it. Shacked up in their seedy Byzantium Hotel, they scheme to keep their secret from unsuspecting new marks in Jordan's seductive, stylish new take on the vampire genre. I love how so many of these sentences have to have alliterations in them. Deliciously depraved, stylish, seductive. It's like, you don't have to alliterate every word. But, okay, so there are a few issues with this movie. I'm going to break it down. It's going to be I would say, I want this to be spoiler free, but I'm going to err on the side of caution that overall this is going to be a spoilery video. One of the major issues I had with this film is that our protagonist is Eleanor, and she is played by Saoirse Ronan, and she is not very interesting. This movie was sold as a mother-daughter vampire story, but there isn't a lot of interaction between Eleanor's character and Clara's character, and that's really what was the big hook for me, because it was about these two female relationships. That's what The Monk Diary was. It was very female-oriented. It's about female relationships between friends and rivals, and I had been looking forward to that. I had actually just watched Mermaid yesterday, so like that kind of mother-daughter story was like still in my head, so I was looking forward to that as I was going into Byzantium. And even though that relationship is supposed to be the hook of the narrative, it's not really explored much in the dynamic of the story. For the most part, Clara and Eleanor don't get that many scenes together throughout the narrative as a whole. They'll pop in, have a little back and forth to let you know they still exist in each other's lives. But overall, Clara is having this whole side story of her own, of her dealing with the fact that she wants to tell her secret about being a vampire, but she can't because vampires aren't allowed to do so. And as soon as you see that and you get that part of it, you know that this is kind of harkening back to Interview with the Vampire. There's a lot of references to other gothic works of fiction. For example, the main villain, or one of the main villains, played by Johnny Lee Miller, his name is Ruthven, so from the Lord Ruthven story, one of the first vampire stories ever written. So you see that whoever wrote this, the writer, knew what they were talking about. But at the same time, you know, when you have Louis and his angst and his story, because Louis is very angsty in Interview with the Vampire, but you understand why. But with this movie, she's telling us about, we see and she tells us how horrible she is, but we don't actually get to see her whole story done. It's done in these flashback sequences, and they kind of jump around throughout the story, so you never really get a feel as to why she has this strong desire to tell her story, why she feels this way, because at least when you finish Interview with the Vampire, you get the sense that he's telling his story as a cautionary tale, because he wants to talk about how, you know, vampirism is not as wonderful as it sounds. But with Eleanor, I don't really know why she wants to tell her story. I don't understand why she feels this attachment to humanity. Is it because her mother just runs around and they're very nomadic and they can't stay in one place? But at the same time, they don't sell me on her needing that. Like, I don't get it yet. I don't understand why she needs that kind of attachment, that kind of strength. Maybe it's because she's never really had a home and she feels like if she tells a secret, she won't have to keep running anymore. But it's all assumptions. There's no clarification, there's no aha moment. There's nothing to really tell us what she wants as a heroine. And she's also extremely passive. Like, every kind of annoying vampire trend is kind of put on her character. You know, she's eternally 16, she's got that angst that seems kind of irrational. She's got the love interest that is kind of bland. You know, he is in remission from cancer, so he was close to death, hence their attraction to each other. They have like insta-love connection, all the check marks of those cliche things. And what makes that, and so when you are in that part of the story, it is largely, in my opinion, uninteresting. I don't care about Eleanor and her story because there's nothing really to it, because she isn't developed as a character. We know that she has been raped. We know that that was bad because the scene where it's introduced, she's crying about thinking about it. But other than that, there is nothing really there to explain her character. Who steals this show and is the best part of this movie is Gemma Arterton. She is amazing as Clara. Her character is engaging, her character is interesting, her character is underdeveloped. I think that's the biggest problem with Byzantium. Underdevelopment of everything. Both of these are underdeveloped, even though Clara is more interesting overall because we at least get her motivation. She's also a victim of rape in the narrative, which leads her into a life of prostitution, due events to what happened. I'm not going to get too much into it because that just isn't that important. You can see if you decide to see the movie. And that's the worst part of her character, because we don't have any idea who she was before that. Her past is not concerned. Like, she literally, as Maven says, she begins when she is sexually assaulted, and then her story begins. And that's just kind of a very awkward way to write that, because, you know, rape is not character. It does not make her a person because she got raped. There should be more to it than that. But that's what first happens, and then after that she becomes, you know, she ends up eventually becoming a vampire. She wants to hurt people who prey on the weak. But we never see her do that. You never actually see her do what she cares about. There's kind of hinted to it when she ends up becoming a madam and taking over these group of prostitutes in the area. It's implied that she treats them better than their other pimp did, but at the same time, we're not given any time with Clara to really see if that's actually true. It's implied, but it's not actually shown if that's the case. But her dynamic, her relationship in the mother-daughter story is saved because of Clara. Clara makes the mother-daughter story show because you actually 100% feel like she loves her daughter, she cares about her daughter, and she wants to fight for her. You feel that in her and how she plays that character. With the reverse, not so much. I don't know if it's because of how the ship's supposed to be seen, like it's supposed to be like that kind of angsty difference, but you don't feel that same kind of affection for Clara. That you don't feel like Clara's love is completely reciprocated by Eleanor's character until towards the end. And by then it was kind of like, well, whatever. The relationship never gets to really develop. You know that she cares so much for her kid. And I think that's the thing too, is that when it comes to the mother-daughter relationship between the two women, I actually was getting frustrated with Clara because I felt like she did not appreciate what her mother had done for her. Her mother, while you consider her means are wrong, you also understand that, you know, if she's gonna be a vampire, she was undereducated, she doesn't know how to like be a business person, so she became a prostitute, and she's worked with prostitution. That's how she makes her money. And, you know, she never puts her daughter into it. When she gives birth to Eleanor, she sends her to a good orphanage so that she can be taken well cared of. She pays for her, makes sure she's well bred. The only reason she even became a vampire was because of circumstances that happened pertaining to the rape. So she is shown to be a good mother. And even when, you know, the thing about them being on the run, when that's explained, it's kind of like, yeah, she's making total sense. The person who seems, you know, irrational and ignorant of kind of the way the situation is Eleanor, and that makes her kind of unlikable as a protagonist. You wonder why we're following her. And it's like, if we're going to compare her to Louis from Introverted Vampire, Louis, for all his angst, while you can say it's justified or not, he's balanced out by Claudia and Lestat always being around him, and Armand being around him part of the narrative. But when, you know, but the thing about Eleanor is mostly with her boyfriend, love interest character who's not that interesting, professors who are not that interesting. She's never with Clara enough for that dynamic to kind of make it worth watching consistently. It's not a secret, I am a feminist, I subscribe to feminism, but I hate this idea that to make feminist movies and to make feminist characters, you have to have, you know, strong female leads. I put strong female leads in quotes because whether they're actually competent or not is usually not the case, as long as they look like they're doing something. That, and then emasculated men. or super villainous rapey men, as if those are the only two options. It's never really a balanced kind of thing, you know. Issues of like patriarchy are more complex than rapists and then men who can't accomplish anything. You know, it's not that simple, and when writers write it that way, it just reads as simple and kind of like not well thought out. And that's how I felt the issue here was with the villains, because they're called the Brotherhood, you know, which is of course is the best name ever for a group of men leaders. And at first they don't let Clara into their group because they're only men run, which that part I could somewhat buy because of the time period, because we are still living in we're in a male dominated society. If we're going it back, I kind of get that. I feel it needs to still be explained because they're vampires and there's no reason for them to be on that cusp of society. But on that note, I will take that. But what is considered a high crime and breaking the law in vampirism for them is women aren't allowed to create other vampires. And, you know, Clara is kind of, Clara is kind of Eleanor's mother twofold, because she gave birth to her biologically and then turned her into a vampire, and it's that reason that they are on the run and they want to kill Clara, because she broke their law. And that was weird. I don't understand why that would be like the big deal breaker for them. And the only thing I can think about is because in the movie themselves they reference Frankenstein briefly. And Frankenstein, a lot of people have talked about how one of the things you can say Frankenstein talks about is how, you know, men can't give birth, but they want to create life, and that's what they do, and how that can lead to consequences. And I kind of felt like maybe they might have been making a thing about how, like, you know, they're a military society, they want to be able to give life the way that women in real life can give life. Like, maybe that was kind of what they were trying to say. Like, maybe had that reference to that kind of theory about Frankenstein. But at the same time, it was just kind of like, it's me guessing. There's no explanation given for them to say why. Like, why would it be taboo for a woman to make vampires? It doesn't make any, it's so specific. It's underdeveloped, like most of the movie is. And it's based on a play. And I don't know if maybe in the transition from the play to the movie they felt like they just had to, I don't know if it was more explained in one version and not so much in the other, but I feel like they needed to broaden up these villains, because the Johnny Lee Miller character who plays Ruthven, he's just a cliche bad guy, underdeveloped, no one cares about him, he's just an asshole rapist. Done. The Brotherhood guy, he's there for a little while, we just know he's sexist, that's it. There's the love interest, he's nice, but he's, you know, he looks like he's dying, he was in remission from cancer, he's very weak. There's the guy that Clara is kind of hanging out with, he's kind of emasculated. He's a nice guy, but he's emasculated. And then there's the co-head of the Brotherhood, who is seen as a really good character, but is very underdeveloped. What I thought about when I saw his character, and I kind of made it was funny because of Gemma Arterton having played Tess of the D'Urbervilles in one of the adaptations of it, that her relationship with that character read like Tess of the D'Urbervilles. It was kind of like that, kind of like Ruthven would have been Ruthven would have been Alex, and then the other guy would have been like kind of like the Angel character. But overall, like, there was nothing to any of these characters. Even the protagonists, like I said, they're underdeveloped. Everything is just like, it's beautiful scenery, really interesting concepts, but nothing is developed enough for it to actually be more than just that. On the surface, it's all very nice, but if you think about it, it's kind of like you don't know why characters do certain things. The only one who's really developed is Clara, but she's not even the protagonist. We don't even get to be with her as often as we would like to be. But God, when she's there, you are so happy. Not only is she beautiful, because Gemma Arterton is beautiful, she's sexy, she's beautiful, but she's talented, and everything about what she brings to the role is great. How she feels about her daughter, her strengths, are just, they seep through the page, and you see it everywhere. The vampirism in this thing is interesting. I mean, they don't burn the sun, but that's not a big deal, because not all vampires have done that traditionally. They don't have fangs, but they do have like these sharp kind of like talon-like nails. Like their thumbnails will grow and be very talon-like. And I like this because I felt like it was a very stealthy way of killing people, because you can just kind of like cut them into the neck and drain them. That's very subtle. Even if you're just walking, you can kind of cut them and start to drink from them. It's a very subtle way of doing it, so I like that. And also that to become a vampire, you have to go to a certain place and you have to choose to die. And you have to be accepting of death, and then you can be reborn. That was interesting. The mythos was interesting, the scenery was interesting, but the characters were underdeveloped.